Hello. Um, Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having us, AI Forge. We are meeting at a moment when AI is no longer a speculative technology, but a systemic one. It is reshaping how capital is allocated and how companies are built, how states think about power, and how societies negotiate trust. India today is sitting at an interesting crossroad. We have talent at scale, like Craig mentioned, ambition at scale, because most of them are building for the globe, and markets at scale. We are still collectively figuring out whether we can convert these enduring AI institutions, not just startups, pilots, or proofs of concept, and I have Vinod having a contra view on it. This panel brings 4 different lenses on the same question. So early stage risk capital, we have institutional capital, we have private equity capital, and academia with us. Each of these actors touch the AI life cycle at a different point and often sees a very different reality. So this conversation is not about whether AI will matter. I think that debate has gone long back. The questions are harder and more uncomfortable. So what will defensibility come from is one of the things that I'm very curious about. And also in the audience, we have quite a few investors as well. I could see Satyakam, who is the founder of Wiser Fund, which is focused on AI. And what kind of AI innovation is actually fundable at scale is something that I'm very curious how you do the scalability aspect. And is India building leverage, or is it just velocity? You know? And what should policy and infrastructure enable without trying to control the outcomes too early, which also means from legal aspects, are we curbing innovation if we were to do more legislations? And my role today is not to extract consensus, but more clarity, to surface where incentives align and where they diverge, and whether the ecosystem still lacks connective tissue. Okay? With that, let's begin. I want to start with one sentence from each of you. What is the biggest misconception about India's AI ecosystem today? Let's start with you, Vinod.
Misconception is that, we'll be able to build some strong IPs. I think we may be able to build at some point, but I don't think so anytime soon. That's my view, I think we rather not chase that, sometimes is what I think. That's what I would say.
I would say the biggest misconception probably comes from our behavioral process. We are a community, or we are a set of people who believe in belief, in the sense that I want to have somebody else believe, and then I will believe. So the biggest misconception, according to me, would be the level of adoption and the diversity of adoption when it comes to the consumer side and the business side on AI.
Interesting question. So before that, hello everyone. And the biggest misconception for me is, that statement which basically says we underestimate what we can do in 3 years and overestimate in 10 years, and overestimate what we can do in 3 years, and that's exactly where we are. I think, like Vinod said, IP, right? There are multiple facets of that IP. Are you really going to do ground-breaking, tech IP like the one that you see coming out of US and China? Maybe not. But where we've really excelled is in building frugally and at scale. So I think we start with a slow train, but we'll probably achieve a fair bit in a slightly longer term. It's not going to be immediate. So for me, the misconception is I wouldn't write it off too early.
Yeah, I may take 2 actually. The one today is the force-fitting of AI into everything what we need to do from an enterprise perspective. I think it is almost becoming to say that if I don't talk about AI, or if I don't apply AI, things will not happen. I think the force-fitting is something what we need to be cautious about. And second is huge misconception, for that matter, a little bit of a threat, to say jobs are going to disappear because of AI.
Let me start with each one of you. Just before I come to you, Vinod, I was reading about S&P index, like Craig was mentioning. Earlier, a company would sit there for 45 years, and the last 10 years, it's been about 10 years that they would stay in that. And right now, I doubt if it can be more than 3 years forming the index. So that will be interesting to watch too. Vinod, let me start with you. So what opportunities are you seeing that you did not see the last 2 years? And what red flags do you see in the AI pitches? And what kind of AI depth is actually investable at seed round today?
I think, before I answer that, I also have this geographical perspective, right? Like, in terms of what is happening here. In India, right, honestly speaking, there's not much that fundamentally is investable. If I have to put it right, the biggest risk is that if you take the LLM out of that, right, the core, then it's just not AI anymore. Then it's just UX improvement or an automation improvement, right? So what we've seen so far is that there is not like a core proposition at play so far. And that is why we've just made, like, say, 1 or 2 investments. But what I anticipate is that because there is some amount of proprietary data within each of the companies that we've kind of built or they're going to build, right? At some point, that data will not be available to others, in a way. I think that is where I think I see some angles. It could be hardware, it could be some data flow patterns, it could be something that is super relevant to the geography, to the people that we are, and also to the companies that we are, or also human behaviors that we are, right? I don't think so anybody else is going to kind of, start building that because they don't know at all, in a way, right? I think that is where we could start seeing some interesting opportunities to play in AI in India. Today, it's still like a very dicey scenario. I am not like super gung-ho that, we're going to build some crazy stuff out of here, which is very, very investable as such. It's not core AI, it's more like something on top of it. That's what's happening. So I'm just keeping my eyes and ears open for some possibilities to happen, and that's where I am currently at.
That's quite a contra view. There are accelerators, like I said, Visor Fund is quite focused on AI, and we are seeing quite a bit in terms of banking and finance. We are seeing quite a bit in supply finance, like supply chain finance that Ravi invests in. We are seeing quite a few opportunities, though. And I worked on Limbic, which got acquired by LTI, and that's how Satyakam started his Visor Fund. And that was 6 years ago. And perhaps the first AI product that got exited. So I do see opportunities, and we are seeing Semicon Design AI company that got acquired by Renesas, which is a very large Japanese fund, a Japanese company listed on NYSE. So I see a huge opportunity, and I'm a great believer of AI changing the world.
I'm a believer in AI that will be there, but are we building out of this geography? Because opportunity for us, when you asked, is it for us, opportunity for us? I think it's limited. Like, we don't want to invest in a feature and tomorrow morning you have Google or, OpenAI. Feature is not a company, right? I mean, we are looking for companies here. I don't want to invest in features, right? So that's what we're looking at. And if it's going to turn quickly in somebody else, like, take any example. What is the biggest AI company that we can talk about in India today? Fundamental core AI. Anybody has any names in the room? Okay, only the people will say something starts with Sarvam. I mean, it's still like how many people are using, right? I think the fundamental core AI, I don't think so we've kind of built. The question is that I earlier alluded to is like, should we even keep attempting at that, or rather focus on other things within AI? I mean, that's a question to ask again. Yeah.
So I think, if I may just add, my part on the behavior, I'll explain what he's trying to do, I think, slightly differently.
I have a contra supporter now.
Yeah. So it's a contra supporter. There's a behavioral pattern that we need to go back. So we'll come to that. But I think, to your point, are we all bullish? We're all very bullish, right? I don't think there's a question on. But when you look at something like this, as an investor, you have a field of things that are coming up. right? And there is a time frame for investment. I think most of his comment will come in from a time frame of when do I enter and when do I exit, right? It's all related to that particular time frame and the maturity of adoption of that within that time frame. I'm kind of putting words into his mouth because that's what you see as
Context,
a context.
So when you are actually doing a due diligence on the technology, what is it that you're looking for? Are you looking for, it has to be core, it can be a wrapper, of course not a feature. What are you looking for?
I think I'm looking for what exactly those points, right? Like it's not a wrapper, it's something if you just take it out, it doesn't become UI or it does not become just automation piece, right? I am looking for something that fundamentally improves something. So for example, take emergent, right? That's been in the news all the while. I tried it for a couple of months. I can code 90% with that. Last 10% is impossible. But if it is fully possible, that's when it's going to be useful for a consumer person, right? It's useful for an engineer to code faster. I think that's a valid revenue making story in some sense, right? For an engineer, not for the last end consumer. So you need to kind of analyze, who is it eventually for? If that fits the curve very well, we'll go for it. But if you tell me that emergence market is like the $6, $7, $8 billion people in the world, I don't think so, right? So I think one, to analyze the market, and is it making a core differentiation somewhere that it can sustain some revenues? Else, somebody else is going to come. When I say somebody else, the big guys who are sitting on tons of data and tons of capital. So they're going to at some point figure out wherever money is, they're going to come there.
Interesting, because at NovoJuris we recently supported an AI project which is very vertical, context specific, of streamlining the entire mutual fund industry's way of doing the business, right? Can there be side letters? Can there be LP agreements? Can there be investor agreements? And we actually did a human in the loop for all of them, tagging it. It's intense. I think that context
Vertical,
building to a specific vertical is where I think becomes very highly investable.
Yeah, and very specifically to that, Sharda, you did this to do two things. One, you did this to create a repository that was not person dependent. I'm going to the why, not the what you did. But if you go back and analyze the why, the first why is in all of these kind of industries where we are building a repository, a big problem has been how do I keep the repository up to date, up to speed and current with taking the person out. With this, you now have an opportunity to do that. The second bit is, as you start building this and working through, you have the ability of allowing the data or your content to dictate the workflow. We have never had that opportunity in a standard workflow system design that we have all done. I've done it for 30 years. You continue to do it in Oracle. You never had that opportunity.
Interesting. So if that is the case, and going back to Vinod's point and your point, Ravi, what constitutes the defensibility in Indian AI companies at scale? I'm just doing Indian AI companies at scale.
Nothing.
No, so I actually believe there is something. So let's go back and work through. One, I'll differentiate between consumer and corporate for two reasons, right? Because consumer, what Craig talked about is a personal assistant AI. Is going to happen. It's a matter of time. We have always had it. I don't know how many of you ever used this workflow designer called IFTTT. Have any of you have heard of anything called IFTTT? Okay, for those who don't know, IFTTT stands for if this then that, right? That's what IFTTT started. It was a very, very rudimentary workflow that would automate your workflow. So way back, I think probably 8-10 years ago, I had IFTTT running, which would link my email to calendar to all the things. I'm not sure what you used it for, but these were simple things. It would pick the headlines of the newspaper and presented this as a synopsis to me. I had this going 10 plus years ago, IFTTT. IFTTT still exists today, though I would probably never use IFTTT in that mode because I will change that. Why? Because in a consumer behavior perspective, in India, adoption is a problem, right? Adoption is a problem because we are still perfectly happy to do it in my way because in some ways I think Statistically, we don't pay too much attention to the value of time. I'd rather spend 5 minutes, do things, aram se, have my coffee, read my newspaper, right? We are kind of working through that. It comes with a behavioral structure that we have. Now, if you take that and go to corporate, right, it changes completely differently. In corporate, I have always had the ability to hire people. I've always had the ability to build resources and not worry too much about efficiency that I'm making out of those resources, right? So to the point that I'm making is, if you are talking about generic, horizontal, chat GPT kind of stuff, I don't know if we can really build moat. Where we can certainly build moat is all of those verticals where we have data complexity and process complexity. Not only language complexity. We keep talking about language. Yes, language complexity exists, but let's face it, bulk of our business is in English, right? Bulk of our business is in English. Hindi will cover more than 80%. You take away language complexity, I don't think we are paying enough attention to the data complexity and the process complexity. That's where I think we will start to add a lot more value.
Srini, your organization uses AI. If you can talk a little bit about what exactly it does.
So from an enterprise level perspective at the media group, what I'm part of today, I think I'll much before even answering that, let me actually go back to the problem what we are trying to solve, right? I think end of the day today, were there solutions similar to AI which were in existence before? Absolutely yes. What is that this is trying to do in a slightly different way? Maybe it's a combination of efficiency, time, cost, and a reliability, right? So a combination of all of that, yes, it may be a wrapper, it may be a vertical solution, but what we are essentially trying to see right now is, I clearly see, I think we have gone to a stage from what to when to how in terms of application of AI today. Application of AI. I agree with the fellow panelists saying that we're not doing fundamentally different LLMs are fundamentally designing stuff what is happening on the ground in India yet. We are an application-oriented industry. We are an application-oriented country. And I do parallels in terms of what happened even in IT services, right? Did we invent too many products? May not be. But did we make a good portion today saying that IT services contributes 8 to 9% of my Indian GDP and generated close to 5.6 million jobs last year? I think there is a merit in terms of considering that and learning from that. So, sorry, I didn't answer the question what you asked. In terms of specifically within Times of India today, we are using on 2-3 fronts. One, in terms of our, people talked about supply chain, procurement. We have something like, people don't realize that, but there are 25,000 plus SKUs, what goes in terms of printing a newspaper. So the complexity of that in terms of procurement, when 90% of your newsprint is actually imported, makes a tremendous sense in terms of bringing the agentic solution in terms of the efficiencies there. We clearly seeing the benefit of that. Very early stages. It's not as if we have done it for ages. It's been a less than a quarter solution for us. Are we seeing the same thing in our newsroom today, where there are a ton of reporters? We have close to 1,000 reporters who are spread across to all over the country. Are we seeing the benefit of using a solution based on AI in terms of simplifying their life from archiving, from quality checks in translations? Absolutely, yes.
I was half expecting that you would say we are using in creative creations.
No, that's a conscious decision what we have taken, that we will not use it. When we use it, it will be specifically called that these creatives are built using AI. I mean, we do have people who follow some of the newspapers. We have something called Times Techies, AII, which both in ET and Times of India, every fortnight, there's a full page dedicated to that. But consciously, we are moving away from in terms of creative content being used by AI, because editorial quality and the dependence is the differentiation.
Interesting. And Ravi, you invest in fintech, you invest in supply chain finance specifically. Do you see any white spaces for founders to build? At the same time, what white spaces are you seeing, other white spaces that you're seeing where founders can build?
I mean, definitely, otherwise we wouldn't be investing in, in those areas because we think they are opportunities. But specifically, let's talk about fintech, right? Let's talk about fintech, and I'll come to supply chain in a minute. And the best way is to come back and talk about what problems have we solved, what problems are fundamental that we are yet to solve, right? So problems that we have solved are availability of resources in terms of visibility. Can I detect something? Can I go back, look at an opportunity? I think we have done the content side, availability side. We have also solved the problems associated with communication and connection. I'm giving it as two aspects. Connection is my ability to connect to something. It could be a backend system, look at a process. My ability for communication to say, this is my needs, this is what I want, and this is how something has to be personalized for me. I think if you take all of those, all of that is, I call that as the execution, the discovery and execution is all sorted, right? So what is left from a fintech perspective? I mean, take whole loan process, right? All we have solved is that there is loan available. You can apply for the loan, which is the connectivity, and the ability for them to kind of fund you, which means that they'll give you a loan letter, right? Have we talked about solving the real issue associated with, risk underwriting? We have not, right? And when people say, yes, we have done it, we have done what, I'll argue, right? If you look at the number of NBFCs that have come in the last 15 years, or actually even the last 7 years, the number of NBFCs have grown up dramatically. You now have an NBFC that's specific just for supply chain, there's somebody just for farm loans, all these guys have proliferated. But if you go back and look at it, whereas the fundamental process of an NBFC should be at an NPA level of a certain percentage, and we have a problem. Right, our NPA levels have been rising, hopefully it will reduce, but if you take the fundamental, so which means that we have not applied that technology to the extent where I can go and talk about risk, underwriting, loan processes, collection, all the downstream processes that I need for fintech is, to me, open in that process. I'll give a, everybody talks about supply chain, but I want all of the people to understand that when you talk about supply chain, it's not the big level item. So if you look at supply chain platforms, there are lots of them, like a CredX, a few others I don't want to name all of them, but there are quite a few of them, including Vana Capital, etc. What people haven't realized is that I can solve the lending portion. I can't solve the treasury portion. Why is this important? If I may, 2 minutes, because people will then understand what I mean. If you're doing supply chain transactions, it's not like a 15-year loan. You're talking about 70 days, 60 days or 72 days on an average, in some days, 90 days worth of credit, right? So you are somebody who's borrowing at 90 days of credit. You want to borrow at 11.5%. I'm just giving you that as an example. If I delay your 90-day credit by 5 days, or you return, if I delay the 90 days by 5 days, my percentage moves up significantly higher, right? Because I have taken 11.5 hours over 365 days, over a 90-day, it moves up significantly higher, right? Which means that I cannot hold the 11.5% unless I know I can deploy money in less than 24 hours. Now, if it's just one, if we talk about 10,000 people that I have to deploy money, that means I have to make money work for me on a daily basis. I cannot do what I was doing earlier, which is end of the month, I will do one transfer from fixed deposit or break an instrument and then work through, which means my treasury has to work fully. Correct. Let's do the reverse. You've taken it on a 90-day, but you have returned it in 46 days. Do you know my whole planning goes for a 6? Which means that I've lost the opportunity cost. Now, he is the banker, you have taken loan from him at 9%. You will not be able to bridge the 2.5% gap because you don't have the cash flow ability to manage that. That is what I call as the gap. The gaps that you have seen is at a very high level. Right. It is not at the transaction level where I can bring in predictability based on the ongoing data that I see. This is fintech. Extend this to supply chain. 5 years ago, we had no access to the number of lorries in the country. Today, I not only know what the lorry is carrying, I know which checkpost, which toll gate it's gone past, how long has it gone, how much time will it reach my endpoint distribution center, and at which time I can go back and say that whether I'm going to do my second run or not, right? If you are going to validate data at that level, our backend systems are still not ready for any of these pieces, right? Because my backend system is still trying to go figure out on my MRP plan, which is outdated. So all of these are going to open up spaces because your earlier cycles of cash management, traditional distribution management, which used to be running overnight or a week's time and a month's time of cash flow, is all out of the window. I need it now and I need the answer now, I need my deployment now, right? So if you take something like supply chain or any finance, the whole treasury thing is going to go for a success. It's going to change completely.
Interesting, which means it directly impacts the EBITDA if that is how you're doing the treasury operations.
Absolutely, because if you cannot manage to do this, it's gone. I've lost that window of opportunity.
Which means it's AI is not a tech guy buying it, it's the business guy buying it.
In my opinion, that's the only way it should be bought. Otherwise, you are not, if it's not adding to if it's not doing two things, it's not changing your unit economics,
right.
No AI will stand long term.
Correct. I have a follow-up question. So we are, Vinod did mention that it is India specific. Now, should these founders build a venture scale? Should they build India specific? Should they build global? How should they think about it?
You want to go first?
No, I think I am generally a believer that you need to take risk, right, if you want to get somewhere. So if we are building something, it's better to think at the global scale from day one, especially if it's something fundamental and core to it. But if you are building something specific, application or a vertical, right, then I think it can be geography specific or a vertical specific as an option. But if you're building something core, I think you should think global from day one. That's how I would think. Actually, the challenge is that, we don't think global first most of the time. I think it goes back to the earlier, what Ravi was saying, right? We don't think big usually, and our ambitions are always limited. I think that also comes from our scarcity mindset, and that's why AI also is, in some sense, a scarcity mindset, even for how we think on what we build in AI also.
So should we build? We should always build global. I don't think there's anything. But there's something very interesting happening. What is happening that's interesting is that the tools that you use have all got to the same commonality. What do I mean by this, right? If you think of the biggest leveler in access, biggest leveler in content, biggest leveler in consumption and communication, that's your mobile phone. What has changed and what I think all of us will realize is that if I am going to use the mobile phone sitting out of India, then I am in no way a different user than somebody is sitting in San Francisco, or no way different than somebody is sitting in Venezuela, in Caracas. I'm exactly the same process. My behavior and what will I do with that data will be different, but my access and approach and the way that I will go through is common. This was not the case some time ago, right? Even early internet, this was not the case. Even with the computers, this was not the case. This has now become the standard case.
Interesting. I think, Madalasa, I need to pick on this because I think the way a product gets built for India versus global will be very different. So I will come back to you and ask that question. But to you, Ravi, we had this, if I may call, season where most SaaS companies in India used to headquarter themselves out in the US or in Singapore, primarily because they could get a Series B onwards, or they would get a acquisition, an exit opportunity more easily. Now that we have sort of morphed into agent as a service, do you think the same pattern will emerge, or do you think, no, it will be India?
No, it will continue to be exit-driven. Let's park that for a bit of time, because I'm very, very hopeful that the things like RDIF, I'm sure you're going to mention it at some stage, things like the data, DPDP, DPR kind of a structure, some of these are going to force, both from a legal and from a construction kind of a process, it will force us to start looking at building things for India, made in India, and where we will start to see value in India, right? Now, exit is still a bit of a question mark, and I will tell you why. It's only, for somebody who's been in this field for a long time, 30 plus years in the IT side, I'm very, very happy to tell you that last year, other than Satyakam, your Accenture buying you out, last 2 years, the first few listed IT companies have made investment in AI-based companies outside of India. Indian IT companies, right? Whether it's a Coforge, whether it's LTI Mindtree, whether it is Infi, TCS is just trying to pick up somebody else. So it's for the first time that we are using balance sheet to do long-term product-related investments. We have not done that for ages, right? We have not done that. Whereas the Oracles, the Ciscos, all the other, I'm just giving you IT as an example, but this kind of spans across everywhere, right? It spans across things. It's for the first time we are starting to see investment in rupee coming in at big value, and not that this is going to impact, this is at some stage hopefully going to impact the balance sheet, because these guys are sitting with this large amount of money sitting on their balance sheet as cash, right? You have to put it to use.
But Sharda, just to add that, right, I think fundamentally, are we adopting AI in Indian enterprises, right? Or like, then that is what they're looking for startups, if they are not able to build it directly in some cases, and that's what's happening. So the question is, are Indian startups going to be acquired by Indian service providers? That's always been very, very limited, right? So we are asking the same question like in SaaS. People went there because customers are there and directly you wanted to sell there and make them comfortable. In AI, right, the gap is so wide. You go to US or San Francisco today, what you would see there today, we will be talking about it like in 8 to 9 months. That means we are already gone. In a sense, we are not able to catch up with the information asymmetry. I know the level playing field of internet and everything is fine, but I still feel when I went there, what I see just started happening in India after 6 months. In a sense, the asymmetry of what is happening in AI is going to exist. So that advantage, right, are never going to be easily available for Indian startups. So Indian startups will be forced to go there to remain on top of it. And for example, I'll give a common company that we have and another investor. This founder goes every 6 weeks to San Francisco and spends his time on the couch with a friend's house just to make sure that his company is not lagging behind, not like going forward, not to lag behind. So if that is the context, right, if anybody is building has to eventually end up there, that is where what the cutting edge is happening, and you don't want to be the one who's left behind. It's not even, in SaaS's case, it's more about traction and, wanting to sell from a position of comfort. Here, it's not even that. This is more like fundamentally that, you will be left behind from a technology point of view.
I think that is where...
It has relevance to the period. So I'll give an example. I can see Kumar sitting there. He was one of the first guys to go into Exodus pre-internet, right? So somewhere at the back, I see. Yeah, one of the first guys to set up Exodus. Now, if you take Exodus as an example, you had to be there in the US, in Exodus, to be able to go do any of those things that are high data intensive, data center intensive. We are going to hit the same problem when it comes to AI-led data centers. Why? Because our ability to ramp up and build that kind of a data center. So if you were a person who was working in data center, data management at high volume, high capacity, then the market is in the US. It's going to be a long time before we catch up. But let's take something very different. If you are going to work in I think Craig mentioned railways. If you're going to work in railways, I would not be in the US. I would be in India.
Correct.
Right? Because the largest investment for rail data systems is going to be in India. It's going to be far beyond Europe, far beyond Japan and far beyond what is ever going to happen in the US, right? So those are industry-specific things that you have to go back and analyze.
I think the product build will happen in a larger scale now, Vinod. So we took an example of SaaS, but Srini, India announced an RDI fund, Research and Development India Fund, and it is 1 lakh crore. It is 12 billion US dollars. And that's deeply focused on deep tech and data centers, one amongst them. And there are many other deep tech focused funds, right? Do you think that kind of infrastructure will move the needle for building large projects in India using AI? Question one. Question two, there are points like Sam Altman saying 100 million plus for building his model, whereas DeepSeek said less than $300,000. Then there is, if RDI fund also talks about data centers, I'm a little skeptical being an Indian. Why are you using my natural resources, my land, my electricity, my water, and having the value outside of India? Does this mean that we will build, using all these, does it mean we will build global products, India products, deep tech products more compared to what we were?
Lots of questions there, and we'll tend to find some answers to that. First and foremost, I think the announcement by the government in terms of setting up such a large, at least intention-wise, we need to see in terms of how it goes, get rolled out, not in terms of the red tape and the bureaucracy. Hopefully it will have something beyond that. I think it's right direction, more so given the fact that it will have a multiplier effect. Very similar to what we have seen in terms of the fund of funds which have been created through other things, given the fact that one of the intentions of this fund is also to invest in alternate AIFs, which are focused for the objectives of that RDI. I say that it will have anywhere between 10 to 20x of leverage. That's a pretty big number.
Fantastic.
Right? So if there is a 1 lakh crore which is going to come from the government over the next 5 years, let's say, that's actually creating 10 to 15 lakhs of investment through that, through the other people who will be putting that together, leveraging other investments, what they may raise in India or outside. That's a pretty big number. Yes, there is an argument to say that why should government or these AIFs should be investing in very, very capacity intensive stuff. Vinod was explaining that just before the panel started. Yes, there are the big houses, the Tatas and the Ambanis and the Adanis of the world who will do that. But also there is a necessity in terms of protecting some of this from a sovereign perspective. I think that's where this will become relevant. And the other point, what you mentioned about saying that, will it take out the very, very precious Indian resources for outside thing, which are obviously, I think I'd reflect on what happened in terms of some of the semiconductor design manufacture, what happened in other parts of the world. Didn't Taiwan go through that, such a small country compared to us? Where did they get the resources to become the center in terms of to be known as electronic manufacturing, powerhouse, and IP-driven entity? It's an investment. It's a thing what one has to do over a period of time. I think it's a right direction rather than saying that, oh, we will not be doing this, we'll be, I mean, fundamentally there was even some of the administrator from the US made a comment to say that, oh, the LLMs are getting developed in US, but they're getting used in India and China. Why are we doing this, right? My perspective on that will be slightly long term. In a short term, it may not create the impact what it needs to create, but in the long term, it clearly creates what it needs to be. Maybe on that front, if I may take a half a minute more, I go through a framework, what I read some time back, which was trying to reflect on some of these platforms when they get created, be it telecom, be it ride roll, be it other things, saying that there is a framework called MAD, M standing for monetization, A standing for activation, D standing for distribution. I think AI today, we are still in the A and D, and M, which is the monetization, at least from an Indian perspective, has not come yet. And we are preparing ourselves to get to there.
Interesting, at least this is heartening to know. Interestingly, RDI talks about India incorporated company, India owned and controlled company, IP to be in India. So how many in the audience are investors? Okay, this is a great framework because RDI has already set up a private limited through which they are going to invest as a fund of funds into the AI focused funds as well, along with other deep tech funds. It's a great time for you to actually approach. There is a policy, the paper is out and I had an early access to it. It's extremely well structured, unlike the earlier SIDBI coming up with very onerous terms. These terms look fairly interesting and easier to get the money. With that, I think the IP being in India, which means if they raise money from RDI, goes to the AIF, goes to the portfolio, then those have to be Indian companies. You made a point, Srini, on AI and talent. Craig touched upon it, saying that there are so many people, so many engineers, etc. Question is, are we primarily supplying AI talent to the world, which is what all of those pictures that Craig showed were talking about? And if it is not about AI talent and building products from the country, what should change? How do we shift that balance?
I mean, one word to that is right, education and training. And that is what we lack today. But I mean, again, I go back to what we went through in terms of our learning 20 years back in IT services. Who came and taught us what to code, right? I mean, at that particular point of time, at least given the fact that I have a few gray hair on my head, they were the similar questions saying that, oh, are the Indian engineers right talented? Can they do the coding? Do they compete with the global tech firms of that time being compared with an Intel or a Microsoft or an Oracle, right? But have we proved today? I think it was interesting for me to maybe draw a little bit of a comparison to say that the global, if there is a brand equity which is being created for IT services, 35% or 36% of the brand equity belongs to the Indian IT services company today. Right?
Fantastic.
So that's a big one. I mean, I was also remembering something else, which was, I know I'm trying to throw a little bit of data. Maybe people who are more closer to home will be knowing this, maybe Vinod and Ravindra, saying that for open AI or open AI contribution from GitHub, India was the second highest contributor last year, just next to US, right? I think I see these are the positive way of looking at that. Yes, we may not be developing the cutting edge AI models from here. We may be still applications, efficiencies, but these trainings will matter for me in terms of going forward, in terms of creating the products later. Today, even IT services went through this in terms of, we all remember, some of us who have been around, the whole concept of BPO, how we used to say that it's so low. Why are we training the IT guys to go and create 10,000 jobs, 10,000 rupees per month or 12,000 rupees per month jobs? I think, yes, how the BPO industry has translated and transformed itself into over the last 10 odd years gives me also some solutions to say that today, human in the loop sort of a training, what is happening for the AI models from India, they will be self-trained, they will be having those technical skills for them to build the models later.
Sharda, just want to add. For India, we have never had an or as an issue. It's always been and. And it always will continue to be and. So what do I mean by that? To the point that he was making, our BPO industry has to grow, to whatever you want to call it as AMS, application management services, maintenance, etc. Whether it is on the technology side with MRO, whether it's a non-tech side, we have to grow that because that is a broad-based structure. Where we had a problem was not with talent. Where we had a problem was local usage and local application. I still tell you that we had some of the best we have heard from Oracle. We built the whole application stack in India, right? But not a single user was using it. So we were building it to the needs and necessities of a global market when I don't have local usage. That is the problem, right? And this is not from a corporate perspective. This was all the way through. This was from government. This was from railways. This was from ISRO. This was across the board. Unless you get to a local usage where I can go back and play around, when that time happens is when I'm going to go and create a whole set of products and associated structure. Until then, I will not have the ability or the wherewithal to do it because I will not have the luxury of time to be able to do this. So think about it, right? It is not as though we didn't have the equivalent of a Zoho. It's only when it started getting implemented that Zoho's traction picked up, right? Otherwise, we have seen similar things happen sitting around, but no traction on local usage.
And that depends on the capital, or that depends on ambition, because I could get both as ambition and capital.
Given he's kind of said that, I think it's a function of both. And for the same OpenAI that we're seeing, I'm sure they attempted like 100 OpenAIs and failed, 99 failed and 1. That means you had to have the capital for doing 100. Unfortunately, we don't have the capital for 100. We have capital for probably 8 or 7. And then, you need to figure out, can we get that one? So the probability math automatically kind of, already goes down, for our risk-taking ability. Our risk-taking ability is a function of ambition, again, in a sense. So it's a combination, classic. I keep telling the size of ambition in the room, right, will really matter for what we can achieve. Else, we are going to kind of underplay ourselves and, and eventually say, look, India has to grow, we have to provide for BPOs, we have to provide for democracy, all that stuff, and, we will never hit. I'm not being pessimistic, for the sake of it here. I'm saying, for us to do that, we first of all have to believe that we can do that, and then, take this government's 1 lakh crore. I think that's a phenomenal amount of money, we are exactly aware. That money has to really go into take some moonshot risks to build some, at least 1, 2, 3, 4 companies. I think that's what even the secretary says, right? You just build like one world-class company out of this. I think he'll be happy. That's what he says. Will any of us be alive to see or not? He also doesn't know. But I'm saying, that's a possibility. We need to go for those moonshot with that 1 lakh crore and not go and put that back into some simple place is what I think. Yeah.
So we do have
capital, but capital is not an unlimited resource.
No, it is not uninhibited. But I'm saying we have been starved, right? I'm saying, see, if you are saying you're comparing ourselves, if I'm comparing myself saying, oh, this is what's happening in OpenAI in the US, China is doing something. This is a function of capital in some sense, right? We have limited capital. And that is also one of the problem, and we have limited ambitions, both put together as a classic, we are sitting in the same well, not moving out of it, in a way.
Yeah, so I think we are hogging too much. I think we should let...
she has an
we'll get into it.
Expert in the room.
So, see, the way I see it is, researcher mindset, so I like those 2x2 matrices which MBA people will come with. I'm looking at it as building for India, building for the world. And both of us building out of India, right? Building out of India, building for the world versus building for India. Foundation versus services. When you're looking at the layers, you're typically talking about foundation models and foundation infrastructure, not just foundation LLMs, but also fab, building things ground up, having a lot of IP related stuff which comes ground up, and then building that nice application, wrapper, services and all of that. And you've got all different kinds of people and different perspectives over here. I think what we are right now here in India is building for the world, but building wrappers. And that building for the world, building wrappers, like Vinod very clearly pointed out, is not going to work. Tomorrow, one of the bigger players is anyway going to eat this up. Building for the world, but with foundational IP. And what does that IP mean? It doesn't mean that you have to go and recreate these LLM models, or you have to build a Sarvam AI, or you have to build, you have to build a fab, you have to build stuff like that. You have to invest in some things which have what are called utility patents, utility IP. And that utility IP, like Ravi pointed out, could be looking at the data flow. Somebody used data flow in that context, looking at tools which are going to enable you to actually take something which is stochastic in nature and turn it into an enterprise, stationary, repeatable outcome. The biggest thing that you see over here is your LLMs are so crazy out there. They do a lot of work, but when they get it wrong, they get it absolutely wrong. So places where you have regulation, places where you have a lot of process, I'm just synthesizing all the viewpoints that we have over here also in a sense. Places where you have process, you have data flow, you need to build to that process. And remember, India has a deep and extensive knowledge of building business process, reformatting, re-engineering we used to call it, BPR. We've done that BPR service game already. So we know how to build the BPR. We know how to build that services on top of it. We do handle a lot of the data and we understand in a lot of the service place the way in which the data flows sometimes even better than our customers themselves. If I'm sitting in a Wipro or an Infi, I probably understand more about Citibank's banking process than the Citibank executive itself, right? And we should not, miss that perspective. So building from India for the world with an incremental IP is absolutely the next stage that we are going. And here I also, concur with Srini saying, we've already done this game, we know what to do. So if you're going to invest in that, it becomes investable. It makes the Vinods of Java Capital happy because they look at something and they say, well, I see some value over here, rather than just being, you want that moat, you want that stickiness. You do not want to be replacing your agent with somebody else's agent. Let's not get into that game. It's essentially what you're saying. The third way in which I see this moving, right, is building for India with the IP, right? Building for India with the IP, but remember the game here is very different. When you're building for the world, you're looking at depth of process. There's a beautiful statement which came to my mind, which is called the data granularity cascade, okay? This is a kind of a researchy term. It basically says that the more we start looking at granular data in one process, the granularity of the data which comes in subsequent processes increases. So when we're talking about treasury operations over here, I really love that. I mean, you look at the granularity of how quickly my flows are going to come back to me, right? And then that granularity needs to cascade down to the granularity of deployment of those funds. Otherwise, I'm not making my IRR. That's what he was talking about, right? Otherwise, I'm left holding the balance, which is there. So the data granularity cascade is also a data play. What we miss is, don't look at the LLM or the AI play only as these models and these agents, but come down to the level of what the data is going to get you. So when you build that IP for India, you're going to focus on Jugaad, you're going to focus on scale, you're going to focus on volume and value play rather than being able to skim whatever is the value which is brought to you because of these agents. I think towards the end, we are going to build, hopefully, for India foundation models. And that, to me, is the place under the iceberg, right, under the sea. What exactly we mean by under the sea level is India is the largest market. Today, if I had an LLM which could speak to me in Tamil or in Kannada, right, and it could answer on voice a whole bunch of the questions that my plumber is going to ask. Click a picture, how do I fit this pipe to this pipe with only these things which are there? That nobody is solving for it. And that's your foundation model. You need Indian data, Indian workflows, Indian systems, all of that. And that's the place where we are going to get sovereign. So, or this RDI, I unfortunately, and here I am happy to be disappointed, and unfortunately I think I might disappoint you in the long term. I don't think we are going to build those moonshot ideas. We are probably going to use the RDI to replicate a lot of stuff that's been done elsewhere with India-specific data. Hopefully build a lot more on India privacy, India security, India first, sovereign AI and all of that. If you're expecting moonshot ideas, it may not work. But if you're expecting an auto which travels best on Bangalore's non-chaotic but potholed roads, that is an Indian innovation according to me. That touches a lot of lives. So RDI is probably likely to touch a lot of lives, and it's probably likely to be defense tech and satellite tech and education and all of that, rather than these, Tesla kind of ideas which are going to come. Maybe it's not going to be that.
Just a piece to your point about getting the local language process. Very shortly, there is going to be a portal launched which is on skills development, which is going to address exactly the same piece in all the languages. This is covering, including things like solar installations, where they can go in, take a picture and say, I need to now support this. So all of that MRO, and the idea is to launch it as public service, right? Fundamentally different.
That would make the change.
Yeah, so fundamentally different. But,
it also makes me think, I will wrap it up soon. How many of you in the audience have struggled with a good, non-biased data sets? All of you. All of you. So, I mean, if you can answer one point of what you struggled with.
So you made a very important point. I think all of us spoke about IT. There's a whole spread of things on materials, on healthcare. There's a whole set of things outside of IT and the IT processes that I think is going to open up for us, right? And these are ones which will have huge leverage, if you ask me, because some of them will allow you to use it in what it's best at, which is increase your predictability, do a bit of consumption behavior, then do a forecast of what needs to be done, and also some bit of creative process, right? It's always great to be working through that.
I'm a big believer of vertical AI. It's not just the LLMs, etc. For me, industry, use case, context, use something for efficiency should impact EBITDA. That to me will have higher adoption from the industry.
Sharda, can I ask one question? Given this is an interesting panel on AI, what about jobs? This is like another perennial macro problem with AI, right? Like I'm just giving my own example, right? Like I had an analyst for some time and now I don't have an analyst. Let's say, I'm just saying I'm able to do the same amount of analysis or even actually better analysis without having an analyst. And I can do that in a much shorter period. I can schedule tasks on Gemini or Manus and leave it and come back in half an hour and it's done like 10 tasks. Imagine my analyst will never be able to do 10 tasks. So I think this is a slightly less highlighted problem in AI, which we will eventually come to at some point. And I would love to hear, what the panel talk, given that they have various perspectives. Are we going to lose jobs? And then, government will have to feed us all. Yeah.
Okay. One quick question to the panelists. And Srini, one capability founders must build in the next 18 months.
For AI or in general founders? Yeah, because in general founders have to keep creating themselves in terms of making them relevant. I think adaptability is the most important, I would say. We are still in very, very early days. Lots of different views in terms of how the whole landscape is going to change. So if I'm going to be a founder in the AI space and trying to build something, apart from the fact that as trying to see what's happening in the worldwide conditions, what Vinod was mentioning, not to be lag behind, not in terms of leading, at least not to be lagging behind, but I would say adaptability.
One question that I have to the audience. One underhyped AI sector in India. Underhyped. I don't want to overhyped. One underhyped sector in India. Oh, great one. Healthcare. Interesting. Interesting. Healthcare. What in healthcare? Interesting. I say legal. Anybody else, Satyakam? Okay, what of it? Come again? Agriculture, interesting. What of agriculture? Interesting. So there are so many industries, and I'm happy to see it was all non-IT as use cases. And I think that is where we make a lot of progress. And AI Forge, when you choose, it'll be all of these sectors where you see a lot of interests.
Urbanization, I think we are not talking about the problems of cities enough, whether it's sanitation, waste, all of that, pollution. That's going to be a big thing.
I agree. And
I hope RDI invests in those kinds of areas. You're right.
True. I think we can go on the whole day, but I have had 2 reminders. And thank you so much for AI Forge for hosting us and a great audience. And thank you, panelists.